Hello there, and welcome to the topic of the unit, which is categorization of computers on the basis of capacity, purpose, and generations. In this, we will study about a brief history of computer on the basis of certain parameters. Along with that, in the end, you would be able to categorize types of computers on your own. Let us begin with something very basic first. What is a block diagram? As you can see in the picture, there is a diagram shown to you, and you can see there are certain symbols in them. Basically, a block diagram is a pathway which shows the flow of data from one component to another. We can represent it using different shapes and symbols like arrows, a plus sign, rectangles, squares, etc. The purpose of a block diagram is to show how and where the data or the information is flowing and which all components are connected together to each other. Let us look at the block diagram of the computer. The block diagram of a computer consists of certain units: storage unit, a central processing unit, an input unit, and an output unit. Unit is a collection of components which perform a certain task. Storage unit helps to store the data, which can be temporary or permanent depending upon the need. If certain calculations are still left and the result has not reached a final stage, then temporary storage is required, which goes into primary unit. If the results are there and it needs to be stored permanently, it goes into the unit of secondary. Along with that, we also have a central processing unit which performs all types of calculations. An arithmetic and logical unit is a subunit of CPU which makes sure that all the calculations which are to be performed as per the need of the user are to be done here. An input unit helps to take the input from the user in any form. We can do it using a keyboard, a mouse, etc., which we will study in detail later on also. Output unit basically produces the output, that is the final result, to the user via a screen or a printer, etc. Let us go on to the classification of computers on the basis of types and on the basis of generations. When we talk about types of computers, we mainly talk about three categories: analog, digital, and hybrid computers. Analog computers basically check or take signals which carry data. That is very important to know that data should be there in the signals. However, these signals are in continuous form. The uses of analog computers are usually in the field of seismology, agriculture, etc. Digital computers, on the other hand, have signals which are in the form of discrete numbers, 0 and 1 mainly. These are the computers which we use in our daily life, whereas hybrid computers control and combine both analog as well as digital signals. For weather forecasting, which controls and checks typhoons, hurricanes, etc., these computers are very useful because they not only collect continuous data, they also go ahead and represent it in the form of digital data, which is helpful. Now, how are computers categorized? Every computer has a different purpose. So mainly, they are differentiated on the basis of generations, purpose, and capacity. Let's talk about classification on the basis of generations. What is a generation? That is the first question again which comes up. Basically, a generation helps to know about the technology which is being used at that particular period of time. Just like we have our generations, younger generation, the older generation, etc. The first generation of computers came from 1940s to approximately 1950s till 1956 in particular. They used vacuum tubes. Now, these early computers used big glass bulbs and a core wire which were nearly sealed in the tubes. These sealed tubes had an almost vacuum atmosphere inside and helped in free flow of electric current. For the memory part, magnetic drums were used. They had a very high electricity consumption because these tubes were large in number. But they could transfer only 4,000 bits of data, which was very less as compared to today. However, they were hardwired and could understand only bits. We moved on to second generation then. Some improvements were made, and from 1950s to 1960s, the computers were used. Now, they used transistors instead of vacuum tubes. A transistor is basically a small electronic device which is not as huge as a vacuum tube. However, it also transfers electric current. Along with this, symbols and assembling was introduced, which meant now that languages could be used. Punched cards were used for input and printouts were taken for output. The third generation computers began in 1960s, particularly from 1964, and were a part of early 1970s. Third generation computers used integrated circuits, silicon chips mainly. An integrated circuit is basically a combination of electronic devices which are combined together and brought as a single unit. Silicon was considered as the best conductor of electricity at that point, and wires were slightly reduced. Also, speed of transfer of bits was increased up to 128,000 bits of data. The best thing came that entry was not through punched cards. It was using keyboards. Fourth generation computers were based on VLSI technology and used microchips. A circuit board was still bigger in size as compared to a microchip, which performs the same task but faster and comes in a smaller package. Micro means small, and a chip is a small circuit which has all the features integrated inside so that they can work effectively. And due to small distance between the components inside, the data transfer becomes very, very fast. This generation also introduced CD drives, CRT screen displays, disk drives, zip drives, etc. So the songs began to play in 1970s, 80s, 90s, and we use them this time also. Fifth generation are the current computers which we are using. They introduced parallel processing. It means that we can actually break our task into certain components and use processors which work parallelly to each other and make the processing very, very, very fast. Huge databases could be handled in a second. Also, video recognition was supported. Video-based movies, like 3D movies, which we studied about in the first topic, they require huge memory space and they need very, very high speed. So these computers helped to achieve those tasks. They also could understand natural language. Sixth generation is the future generation, which on the basis of artificial intelligence would be able to take any kind of decisions on certain parameters, and they would not use our help much in order to execute tasks. In fact, if we look around the world, these computers are already there, being a part of our lives, which we do not know even. But we'll get to know about them later on. Now, there are certain basic requirements for any computer in order to make it work. There are certain components which should be there for the best effective performance of a computer. Let's look at them one by one. First of all, there is a hard disk drive, which is the main repository for storage. That means permanent storage of data. RAM, on the other hand, temporarily stores the data. Processor processes the data and produces the result, that is, gives us the information. We need the computer to work also, so battery is required to provide a backup in order to help in need of an emergency. An output device, mainly a screen to see the results, and an input device to help the user input something using a keyboard or mouse, etc.